Hello and welcome to another episode of Jaxon Talks. Everybody, with me, your host Jaxon Stone, and this is episode number 88 of Jaxon Talks, everybody, which is pretty cool. Heading towards episode 90, heading towards episode 100. Those will be special episodes. Everyone is a special episode. So thank you for joining me again today. I have an amazing guest who I connected with via my uncle Eric. And he thought that we should chat and connect, and he was absolutely right. The person I'm joined with today is insightful and wise and generous and vulnerable, and she has written a book. She is an author, like I said, a speaker, a coach, someone who's just enthusiastic about helping people and sharing her story and trying to understand more about grief and how we can regain our sense of joy and wellness after a loss, specifically after the loss of a child. And so today, on this episode of Jaxon Talks, everybody, I am joined by Peggy Green.
And Jaxon, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here this morning.
Yeah, I'm pumped. It's pretty early, but I'm still fired up for it, ready to go. Because you're coming from where in Colorado?
I'm coming from Highlands Ranch. It's south of Denver, so it's early and cold. We've been getting some great snow, which is awesome to see.
Have you been a Colorado person your whole life?
I am a Colorado native, but I don't ski. I love the outdoors. I know. What a travesty that I don't ski being a Colorado native. But I do love the outdoors. I love getting outside and hiking and camping and running, and have picked up pickleball. I participate in that new phenomenon of pickleball.
Pickleball is just taking over the world, okay? My parents,
It's exploding.
yeah, my parents are hopping in on the trend of the pickleball. It's great. It's amazing. I was actually just in Colorado, maybe the last time we spoke, which is maybe, I don't know, a month ago. I was there like maybe a week before that. I was in the Woodland Park area, and we did the Manitou Springs incline, which was pretty intense.
Yeah. To think that we approach ourselves to climb stairs.
It's so true.
I guess it's better than the indoor stair climber, that you actually feel a sense of accomplishment when you get up there, that there's a beautiful view. You get to see Pikes Peak. So yeah, it's worth it to do the incline.
Absolutely. It was really hard. And I claim to be in fairly decent shape. And it was still really, really challenging. My girlfriend was there with me, and she was the one who was pushing me most of the way because she's a beast. But yeah, it was a great time. It was a great time.
Well, come back.
Absolutely. I love Colorado. I'll be back as soon as I can be. But to get this party started, I always start this podcast with one question. Usually the one question I have prepared, but I prepared a few more questions for you after going through kind of your book and seeing all the coaching stuff that you offer, and your website and all that stuff is really quite brilliant. But my first question, the most important question, something that I'm sure you ask a lot and you get asked a lot and try to answer openly and honestly and vulnerably. So hopefully we can do that now with this conversation. But Peggy, how are you doing? Like for real, for real?
And that is a good question. So it's 6:15 in the morning on a holiday morning, and I'm doing great. I feel that I'm in a place where I should be. And I think your audience kind of needs to know where I'm coming from as well, and what a little bit of my backstory is. So I'll share a little bit about that. And this answer, being a little ambiguous, might make some more sense to them. How's that sound?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So think of this. I'll share my story. December 2018, I was driving home. It was a little bit before Christmas time, and I was lost in thoughts, thinking about all the things I needed to do. Like, Christmas is coming up. What's my checklist? Who do I need to buy presents for? What shopping do I need to do? Who do I need to call? And then I was looking at the lights around me and just in that holiday festive mood. And then my phone rang, It was my oldest daughter calling me, and it was common for her to talk to me while I was driving. But she was kind of discombobulated. And I heard her say something to somebody else in the background. Well, he hasn't been feeling well lately. And I knew immediately she was talking about her brother, my son, because they worked in car dealerships that were right next to each other. And they were frequently found together. So I knew she was talking about her son, but my mother's instinct told me to get off that highway because something was wrong. And I kept yelling at her, Brittany, 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 and she didn't answer. So I hung up, called her back, and she was just able to blurt out with tears, I don't know how to tell you this, but Connor is dead. He killed himself. So I hit my hands on that steering wheel, Jaxon, and just said, oh God, how? Why? And this took me a flashback of 28 years earlier, because I had also lost a 9-month-old daughter. And so here I am sitting with now experienced the loss of 2 children. And it's been over 3 years now since Connor passed. And it's been quite the journey to get to where I am. You mentioned that I'm an author and a grief coach and a speaker, and that's quite the journey of itself. So to share, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, thank you for sharing that. I firsthand understand what that feels like to share that story all the time. And it's just really complicated, the grief is, and where it can lead you if you allow that kind of most tragic, painful moment to alter you in a way that allows you to maybe value life a little bit deeper, and to be able to share that with others who haven't yet found the strength that they already have inside of them to find their joy again and regain this sense of well-being and happiness. So, I'm still in the midst of it, just like you. 2018 was the year my sister passed away, and so I'm a little over 3 years into it as well, and trying to do some of the same things that you're in the midst of doing, and while working through my own stuff and sharing that journey and process with other people, and coming together in that process, and linking arms with those folks who feel the same way, and trying to just navigate these waters together, I think has been an important part for me. And I'm thankful that you're doing the work that you're doing, because it's helping, and it's saving people's lives, and it's allowing us to know that we can overcome these things, but we don't have to overcome them by pushing them away or shoving them down, but by facing them head on, and then moving in that direction with that pain kind of forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Death by suicide is very unique. And I have found that as I've experienced loss. I'm trying to get out of saying that word lost, because to me, it's like then I'm continuing searching to find them. And so now that my 2 children are gone, and they've been 2 very different modalities of passing. And so I've struggled with why it's been so different. I have experienced the death of not only 2 children. Those are my bookends of grief right now. But in between in there, my father passed away at the young age of 69. My sister was only 53. And then more recently, my mom was in her 80s. But then I also have experienced other cousins, a niece who died by suicide as well, who was my son's age. And so those are my bookends of grief. And now to use that experience and that growth to help others is where I've gone. So I spent, after my son passed away, that initial shock will be there, even if I've been experienced. And I chose to just blog, I guess, on Facebook. I don't know what else to call that is. I started blogging my pain, my grief, and I had so much support. But as I progressed, that pain and grief started to transfer into how I was healing. And that was helping others. People who are following and commenting on what I did, they could see that progress and like, oh yeah, that's helping me in my grief. Wow, I could have used that. Wow, I'm going to apply that. So I made a commitment to myself to start to keep blogging on Facebook. And through that, I had so many of my friends and family, and even those who I truly don't know on Facebook, recommend and ask for me to write a book. So I did. It's not something I ever intended to do, but it took, when I look back on that year and the tools that I used, it's like, I need to share these. I originally thought, this is how I'm not experienced in writing a book. I was like, oh, great, I got my book written. I'm just going to pull all those blogs off of Facebook, throw it in a book, and I'm done. Not, that's not the way you write a book. However, I must tell you, if you want to see my journey, that is available on my website. It is called The First 365 Days. So the website is thegriefspecialist.com, and it's with 2 E's, because I feel like I am the one. I am the one with the answers. So if you want to see that progression, you can get that on my website. And then the book is Life After Child Loss, the Mother's Survival Guide to Cope and Find Joy. And the reason being is, Jaxon, is when my 9-month-old daughter passed away, 1991, my mom was available, my sister was available, and maybe a couple close friends. So I had somewhat of a tight inner circle. But even at that time, my grief was so different than my then husband that we really didn't support each other. And I didn't get that support. And that's not uncommon. People don't grieve the same, and especially with child loss, that's very different. And so I didn't have that support. And I made it through my tenacity, my perseverance, and to pull together all my life experiences to help me get through it. And that was tough. Back then, really, child loss was swept under the rug. I mean, it still is, but we're doing that job of opening it up, and the loss by suicide. And so I felt that I had a lot to share. And so that's what this book is about, is really that journey and the things that I used to be able to process then, and then more recently, my son. But everything that I've gained in between all those other losses I've mentioned.
Yeah. Why do you think, for parents of children that they lose to suicide, why do you think that causes so much tension between the parents? Is it because the guilt, the blame, the shame that they lost a child? Are they blaming each other? What has your experiences told you about that?
All of the above and so much more. I mean, as a parent, we feel that obligation to protect our children. We feel that we know our children. We know that what's going on. And in the case, I mean, just there's so many examples, even with my son. He was 24 and he was kind of struggling with what a 24-year-old can be struggling with as a young adult, is that still getting on his feet financially, relationships, career. And then he had something that just culminated, which broke the camel's back. And he made a decision, and that decision changed the trajectory of his life by ending it, and then the trajectory of the rest of the family and those close to him. But he didn't talk about it. He was loved. He was happy. This is all outward. He may have shown a few signs and saying something, especially in reference to his cousin who took her life as well. But there wasn't any alarms or red flags that we said, we have to do something about this. We have to take him to a mental institution. There weren't any of those red flags. So as a parent, you want to protect them, but when we don't know what's going on inside their heads, we can't protect them. And even if we knew what was going inside, we can't control them. We can't control what they think. We can't control what they do. One of the tools that I use with that, Jaxon, is as there's something called the 3 C's. And this one actually comes from 12-step programs. I attended one as a family member of an alcoholic and to support that, so Al-Anon. And I myself wasn't alcoholic, but I knew others. My ex-husband was. And the 3 C's, you can't control, you didn't cure, and you didn't cause. So you can't control what's going on in those thoughts. You can't cure their problems, and you didn't cause them to take their own life. So to be able to process it and think about, those 3 C's. So parents come to the table, and it's relevant to even their relationship, their life experiences, how they went through and processed grief, even when they were younger. But there is so much associated with suicide. The shame, because there are people that just won't mention it. They're so ashamed that they're like, oh, my son took their own life, because they think that others are judging them. They feel guilty that they weren't able to do those 3 C's, or again, that they couldn't cure them. They feel guilty that they didn't know them. They feel guilty that even if they did know some, that they felt that they could have done more. Mm-hmm. And there's just so many questions of why didn't they come to me? Well, and I have one of my clients right now who's struggling with that. Why didn't they come to me? Because for the person who chooses to end their life, there could be that pride. I think that's part of it. It's like, oh, no, I'm not going to admit that I have mental health issues. But then also the other thing is, when you're in the midst of mental health issues, you don't know that you have them. And it's like, you may not feel right, but you can't put your finger on it and say, wow, this is what I'm feeling, and this is the kind of help that I need. Because sometimes it's that inner turmoil. So it's difficulty, and to have 2 parents who do it and react so differently. I mean, just even for example, when Courtney died, my 9-month-old, is that my ex-husband did not want to talk about her. Mm. And even when we went to my in-laws for Christmas, my mother-in-law had a tiny little apple tree with little apples on it with the names of all of her grandchildren. And she would take Courtney's off. And this is when I had 3 other children, when we went, and because the other cousins knew about her, but my children did not. I finally had to break that ice and share with my kids, but he couldn't talk about her. For whatever reason, maybe just too painful. I don't quite know, but he couldn't. But for me to talk about my children, it's healing and it's remembering them. And I liken that to my grandmother passed away. I talk about her. Yeah. She's gone. But let's talk about my children as well. And people just don't understand that. So there's so many reasons why spouses find it difficult to really work through child loss and then child loss by suicide. There's so many questions. It's unique and it's very different.
Yeah, in in a personal story, at the very beginning of my journey after I lost my sister, when people asked me if I had any siblings, I would say that I was an only child for a very brief time after she passed, because that's how I felt in that moment. And then I would go home and I would think about that interaction and I would feel way more guilty about it, because that's not true. It's not true. I have a big sister. Her name was Rachel. She was a magical human being. Just because she's not with me alive, she's still around, and all that good stuff that I believe to be true. And so I've grown to say that, of course, yes, I have an older sister. And then, people ask follow-up questions. And then I choose to answer those questions in regards to how much energy and space I have available for that. But I'm not dismissing or letting my sister go in any sort of way, because she is my big sister and she always will be. And so I had to learn that. And that's a challenging thing, because, people ask you very common questions like, what's your job? How many siblings do you have? And for me, both of those questions now in my life involve the work that I do in mental health, and mostly involve my sister. So it just depends, how I can answer that question. But I want to start by answering it honestly and openly, and then divulging as much information as I want, depending on how I'm feeling the day, the person I'm talking to, the setting, right? All of those things. But initially, I want to be very honest. And that was an important lesson for me to learn, because then I wasn't going home feeling guilty and shameful about just forgetting my sister, because that's not what I want to do. That in itself can never happen, because I'm living my life and that's what she would have wanted and things like that. And so that was just an interesting process for me to go through. And I'm sure, parents go through the same thing when thinking about their child. But I do agree with you wholeheartedly that it's so, so, so important to talk about your loved one that you lost, because it's like the memories you have with them are beautiful, and they shaped you, and they're still shaping you, and they're changing you, and they're encouraging you to grow and live, and not move on, because that's a bad phrase, but move forward with it, I think, is a better phrase. And so, yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. And Jaxon, I'm so with you on that. And there are times, because my bandwidth is low, that I do just mention my two living girls, because it's also, I make that snap decision. Who is this person? How much are they going to dig? And how much, excuse me, how much can I share? And then also it's like, how well do I know them? And where is this relationship going to go?
Yeah.
Because it really is, it changes. And I really think that it's different in between losing a sibling, because my sister has passed, so I've been through that. But losing children, and it's very quickly shuts down the conversation. Because they don't know how to do it. We're not trained. We don't know how to respond to child death. Mm-hmm. And however, when I have mentioned it to others, I've also opened up that door for conversations for others whose child has died by suicide, and that we now have made that connection and understand, and we speak that unique language and have that deeper level of understanding. So I find that really opens up some as well. And even when Courtney passed, is that as I spoke with others, that because it was at such an early age, I've had others who have spoken up more about child loss and pregnancy and stillbirths and birth defects, that they only lived a short period. So it's also opens up that dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely does. Circling back to originally when you kind of initially started sharing your story and talking about you writing a book, I think that path that you're kind of been riding and on now and kind of has landed you at is really quite amazing, because you started on just Facebook, right? Sharing your story, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, very similar to journaling, but you were doing it in a public place on a public platform, which is one takes a lot of courage and strength, especially feeling the way you were feeling while you were feeling it, and then sharing that. And then, you know, not yet being an expert on the subject per se, but being an expert because of your own lived experience, which makes you an expert. And then just deciding to write a book, amazing, right? And then on the back of your book, the bio says health and wellness enthusiast, which now a couple of years even after that, it's even that's not really true, because, well, you're still an enthusiast for health and wellness, but now you're actually a speaker and a coach and a specialist. So you've like moved through these different channels, but you wrote this book when you were just feeling the way you were feeling. And now you have this book, and on top of this, you have this framework and these ideas and this specialization in how to move people through grief. And I think that's a cool transition, because I think a lot of people feel like they need to write the book after they're like deemed a specialist or an expert, but you're a specialist. Anyone in general is a specialist or an expert if they've gone through the thing that they're going through, and anyone can talk about it. And it's so cool. You know, that's the great thing about social media, no matter what its negative connotations are, which there are a lot, sure, but there's some beautiful positive aspects of technology, and the way you utilized it and traveled to where you are now, I think is quite amazing. So yeah, I'm just acknowledging you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. So yeah, writing my book was very cathartic. And really, when I started putting and evaluating how I made it through, you know, so that's where this first book is. It's Life After Child Loss, the Mother Survival Guide to Cope and Find Joy. So that framework covers things such as having community. Remember, I talked about that, and I had a close circle, but it's also to have a bigger circle, and then even bigger, to have that reaching out. And so something I want to put a caveat and a little bit of a warning regarding social media, especially Facebook, because that's where I am most of the time. There's a lot of different Facebook groups, grief groups, which I participate in to see the pulse of what's going on. But I also see there's some good and there's some bad. So just to be aware of that, because as you're in that Facebook group, there are people daily who come in because they've just experienced a loss, the death of a loved one, the death of a child, and they're raw. And maybe you're 3 months into it and you're starting to feel a little bit better. Then you come in and you experience this rawness and this pain again, and it just pulls you back in. And then you progress, and now you're 6 months and you see somebody else that's just as raw. So you continue to just pour salt in that wound. So if you need to participate in one, and I have, but do it mindfully with intention and purpose. If you need some support, and it's like, today's a tough day, I need some support, and they're great for that. But if you sit there and scroll through and through and through, you just see more and more stories of tragedy. And not to say we don't feel a heart for them. We can pray for everybody in that group, that what they're going through is that they're healing. But put yourself in forward motion. Don't continue to be drawn back into that sinkhole, into the depth of the new grief. Or you can go in and support one person and then pop back out. Use it mindfully and carefully. So Facebook can be a community. Right. It can be your tribe. And then the other things is just being able to, it said being able to talk about your child. I call it, in a chapter of the book, is the elephant in the room. And we've talked about that and mentioned, that was important. And I share that story about Christmas time. And even the other things that you can be struggling with. Like, what kind of memorial and when? At 24, we hadn't had a conversation with my son regarding death and what he would want. And so cremation was chosen. And then what? We didn't have a memorial, a place to go. And we ordered, with those cremation, with his ashes, a living tree memorial. And what that is that the ashes, a bit of dirt, some toppings like bark, and then the receipt of a sapling about 18 to 24 inches. Being in December, we didn't order it yet. We still have yet to order it because we ran into some hiccups in trying to find where we could put it. I was like, oh, we'll go plant it on National Forest ground. Well, A, I think that's probably illegal. And B, who's going to take care of it? And C, the deer and nature, the likelihood of that making it through a national forest. And then E, are we going to go visit it? No. So then we did some more research and found a local park where Connor skateboarded. He cut his teeth on skateboarding at a park in Highlands Ranch. We're like, perfect place. Well, they won't take saplings, kind of for the same reason. So we wound up purchasing a tree and having it planted close to where he spent so much of his time. That was 2 years later. So there's no rush if you don't know. You don't have to make those decisions immediately. Others find that a traditional cemetery and gravestone are what works. But deciding what you want to do for a memorial. The other thing is what to do with their possessions. I mean, I remember walking back after Courtney passed away that night. We had a room and we had laid out a blanket on the floor. You know, that's where she had played the night before, and we scooped it up and just threw it in the bedroom. And I shut that door. She was the first of my 4 children. So me on the practical side, I guess, kept everything. And even the crib blanket got passed through all my children until my last one wore it out. So we kept those. And there's a few special ones that I've kept in a box. And then my son lived in a house and he was a roommate, and he took some of my mom's furniture after she passed away into this house full of 20-something boys. And we left all the furniture. We took his clothing. He was a tie-dye guy. He would wear tie-dye t-shirts. So we dispersed. He had 20 t-shirts. So I dispersed them to his friends in the house and to other family members in his memory. But there's a few things that I've kept. I have a coat. You know, I have his name tag. But what do you do with those? And what feels right? Yeah. So I have something that I kept and preserved and others that I just gave away. But helping to guide you through that. And then taking care of yourself. You know, that's a big piece. And there's so many important pieces in being able to make it through this. And so much more of it is covered in that book, in my first book.
Yeah. Amazing. And you're in the process of writing book number 2, right?
Yes, I am. I am.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this one is more specific to suicide because after Connor died, as I mentioned, and as you well know, the complexities and the why. And one of the things that really helped me in even processing that was understanding it. So I think for so many others who have experienced the death of a loved one, that they're suicide loss survivors, that we want to know why. And so I really cover a lot about suicide and even that inner thinking, what's going on with you? What do you think is going on with them? And talking about acceptance, because I honestly believe that until we accept the death of a passing one, if we continue to live in denial, that we'll never be able to move forward because we're stuck in the past. And as a grief coach, I talk about the present and we focus on forward motion. So in my book, I cover acceptance, talking about the fear that's associated with moving forward and the healing process. And then finally, recovery in physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And this brings me to that point of, you mentioned that I was in fitness. Well, yeah, I grew up being active. I played in outdoors all the time. I gardened, and I knew that's what kept me healthy. And that's one of the premises I think and believe that really helped me to make it through so much. But in that practicality, bless you. In that practicality of surviving things in the life experiences. So I have a formal degree in fitness. I was a personal trainer for 14 years. I have a formal degree in business marketing, in knowing how to relate to people, in bringing those formal educations along with the personal training of coaching, understanding, relating, and helping people. I bring that together with all these other experiences in my growth in my mental, emotional, and spiritual. I combine all of those to give you a holistic picture of how to move forward, because so many times I see in the mental health professional realm is that they forget the physical piece. Mm-hmm. And we know that the physical piece, you're shaking your head, yes, you totally agree. The physical component that we, get outdoors, we feel better. Our body produces hormones that helps us feel better, which actually go to our mental function. And that helps, and it starts to flip switches. And then when we start to mentally think better, we feel like we want to exercise more. Then we reach out to our higher power. For me, is God, that we can do that. So it all works together. And I think that's really very foundational, is that we do not forget those components of health. I think it's critical that we combine all those. So bringing the whole thing together, that's my philosophy on healing. And that's where I bring that together in this next book. The working title is Survive Suicide Loss. Yes, you can. And we'll see if that's the working, that's the working title. And it may change. But the goal is to help those, especially parents, and maybe even mothers who have lost a child to suicide, a child has died by suicide.
Well, I'm excited for that book to come out and for how it impacts people even more than your first book. But I want to circle back to something about initially dealing with the loss of a child, or dealing with anyone basically who you lost in your life, and dealing with those firsts that come into your life. First birthdays, first New Year's, first Christmas. You lost your son Connor very close to Christmas, and so I'm sure that first Christmas was extraordinarily challenging. What kind of advice do you give people in those instances or those occasions when those things pop up for the first time?
Jaxon, that's a really interesting question, because again, the differences. And so I can just share how I deal with it, because my younger daughter is totally, totally different. But yes, December 14th, shortly before Christmas, and having my son pass away. And I think that I was in shock, definitely in shock. And part of what I did, I think, was just on autopilot, going through the emotions. However, I also knew that for me to sit in silence and on the couch and under the covers isn't what was going to work for me. So I did my best to get out and do some of the things that I enjoyed, but also gave myself the grace. If something came up, I could excuse myself, I could leave, I could cry. And the first Christmas is like, yeah, it's here. And so it was that earmark, like, wow, this is the first one. And it felt so different. And I had the family with me. And it was difficult. Even though I wanted to, it was difficult to talk about Connor. And each time, each date, I had to acknowledge that yes, I'm accepting it. And for me to get through all those first, so Christmas, my birthday is December, and then New Year's. So 3 holidays in a matter of 2 weeks. Yeah, I guess I just called my birthday a holiday, didn't I?
I'd say it's a holiday. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so 3 of those special days, and to think in my mind, especially because Connor was 24, as an adult, I thought, what would he want me to do? How would what words would he say to me to help me to get through this? And what I heard was, Mom, keep going. Got to keep going. And when it came to his birthday, we had a small celebration, and that's in March. And then as all the other holidays came around, we tried to still do things as a family in his honor, recognize that he wasn't there, and move through it. And after that first one, it was a big sigh for me, because I know how I've gone through grief. And that after that first year, that's a big aha, that I made it.
Mm-hmm.
And found that I was able to make it. But to recognize him, celebrate him, and live life. Life doesn't stop when somebody else dies. It's part of this circle of life, and I think sometimes we forget that life and death are inevitable.
Yeah.
Now, we may not always like the timing, we don't always like the how, but it's part of that circle of life, and we need to remember it. And there's no guarantee. We've developed through the years this expectation that parents outlive children, or children outlive parents, excuse me. It's this societal expectation that's like, this is supposed to be the way it happens. But step back 100 years ago, even in the farming community, families would have 10 children. And by the time they would be 10 years old, half of them would have passed away either due to accident or disease. So there's no guarantee. And I think that's part of it, is to realize that and accept, like, this, there's no guarantee. And I think that was very helpful for me as well, going, this is part of life.
Yeah. That's a nice way to say that, is to recognize it, and then to celebrate that life and those moments and what they would want and all of those beautiful things. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. It For me, I think about a lot of, like, since my sister passed away, I valued life and the moments, much more than I ever would before. And that makes you think about, like, well, what did I miss? What did I not recognize and celebrate in my life that was special and amazing before this happened? And so now, just like you, I want people to do that, to recognize that, to celebrate that, and to live in the present and be alive for what you're doing. And no matter how long life lasts for you or for anyone around us, let's enjoy it as much as we can, and have our joy and our happiness and our fulfillment and our meaning and our purpose and all of those things that you can acquire and live through in your life. But it's hard to do that unless you've gone through something really painful to kind of invigorate you to live that way. And so my urge to people is to start now, live now, celebrate now, tell the people in your life you love them every single day as much as you can. And and see what kind of beauty and magic you can create in your life through that kind of love and kindness and fragility that life has.
Yeah, absolutely. When something is tragically taken away from us, when it's no longer accessible to us, we miss it even more. But to be able to think about it, which you've done an amazing job as well in your transformation and how you're helping others and becoming that mental health advocate and wanting to help young athletes to be that role model. Because I think so many times is that in our so many things that are dysfunctional, that to be that role model and help others and to just do something simple out of, I write and publish now, instead of the daily Facebook posts, I have a Thursday thoughts, which I write and publish. And if you want that you can also sign up for that on my website. But one of the things that I went to a wedding in October of last year, and this young lady was a peer of my son's and family, known her parents and watched her grow up, and she had they had a memorial table for those who were not in attendance, in which a lot of times it's older grandparents that couldn't make it, that they've either passed or they can't travel. And there were two special photographs on that table, one of the groom's friend who had died many years earlier in high school, and then one of Connor. And that just really was so beautiful for me. So I blogged about that and shared. And out of that arose so many people responding to that it was recommended that I start a group. So I started a group called Gestures of Kindness, where we get together as a group and do different things to help our community and paying it forward. Not to say that we don't do it individually, but this was really nice because it struck a chord with them as well. And so we have gathered packages for the homeless. We've gathered food and supplies for animal shelters. And currently we are providing meals for one of the members who's going through cancer treatments. And so to be able to pay that forward and have that joy and find that purpose to help others and then really love everybody. We don't know what they're going through. A simple smile and having the patience and the grace, I think, is just so important. And so many times when we do it for others, it really lifts us up.
Mm-hmm.
So help others and it will brighten your day. I challenge you to say hi to 3 people in the grocery store or let somebody in line in traffic.
Yeah. Life is really, really hard sometimes, and added some grief into it, it makes it really complex. And so love and empathy and compassion and kindness for yourself is very important. And passing that on to others can make life not a little bit better, but a lot better, and a lot better for all of us when we feel that way about each other. And for strangers alike, I think is quite important and unbelievably powerful. So yeah, absolutely. So I have from your book here, which is right here. You wrote here on one of the last few chapters, the framework for regaining joy. And I'm just going to kind of go through the framework here one by one. But number 1 is to journal, which I'm a big proponent of. So I think that's amazing. Number 2, find your tribe, your community, your support group, right? Number 3, talk about your child or your loved one, right? Remember them for how amazing they were. Find your higher power, whatever that's religious, faith-based, spiritual-based, all that stuff is quite important. Believing in something bigger than yourself. Remembering your child. Number 6 is dealing with holidays, birthdays, and firsts, like we just touched on. Number 7, self-care. Number 8, personal growth. And that's it. So that's your framework right there for regaining joy. How did you construct that, and why do you think that's important?
Yeah, that is just so much of all the things that I brought together to be able to do this. And when I evaluated those Facebook posts, that blog, I looked at it and said, yeah, this is what I did. And these are the important things that helped me to get through it. And while there's no order on any of that, I did start with the easier one with journaling because it's so simple, so easy. There's no rules to it. It's a free flow of your thoughts. The only recommendation that I make is that you date it, put the date on it. And if you journal a couple times, put the time. Because just like my Facebook blogs, I was able to go back and look, oh God, this is where my heart was really raw. And I had nothing else to say except talk about my pain. And then as I moved further, I saw the progressions, like, okay, this is how I dealt with it. I was having a tough day, so I went for a walk and I got outdoors. So journaling is the easiest of them all. It's a safe place. There's no judgment. You can cuss, you can write every single thought, when a lot of times there's anger at the person who chose to end their life. And you can write that down and get that out. Or you can write and say, I love you. This is how I miss you. I wish you were here. But journaling is so easy. And so I started with that and then moved on to it, through those different steps and processes, your tribe and your, finding their memorial and their possessions. And the last one is personal growth. I tell you, I've been a big believer of personal growth because in a time like this, we make a choice, we make a decision how we want to live our life. Like I said, we don't let death dictate how we live because it's natural. It's natural. So we want to be able to move forward through that. And personal growth helps us. And even if it's listening to positive, uplifting podcasts, things that can help you, like this one, Jaxon, that people can hear this, they can listen and learn. Or if there's something that they want to learn, like a new sport, some music, reading, arts, a craft, something that challenges you to become better. And maybe it's something that you do in honor of your loved one. I mean, I've been in the coaching realm in one way or another for 15 years. Did I ever anticipate that I would be a grief coach? No. But do I do it in honor of my son and saying, this is what he would want? He would want me to help people to take that experience and help others who have experienced a loved one going on before them. So that's just really huge. So, think about this whole progression. And I really like this analogy is you're initially standing in your grief and you've got this big canyon, this carafe of vastness with rushing water underneath you. And on the other side, there's greenery and there's hope, but you don't know how you're going to get across it. But there is this rope bridge that's in between you and the other side. And that rope bridge is constructed of rope and maybe some slats on the bottom. They're not together. There's gaps in between them. And the rope is just skimpy, barely enough to attach. So it's anchored on both sides. There's grief on one side. And then on the other side, there's your hope, your peace, your joy, and your happiness. And you want to move across that. You see it, but you don't know how to achieve it. You're standing there at the very, very beginning and thinking, I want this, but how do I do it? And this is scary as all hell. It's scary because you could slip, you could fall, you could what are the perils that lie below? There's that fear, but being able to take that first step. Okay, am I going to journal? Am I going to get outside? You take that step and you're holding with a grip onto those ropes. And if you look down on what could be, if you fail, then it's terrible. And instead of doing that, you want to focus on the other side. Take that step, taking each step. And sometimes it's short in between sides. But when you get on that bridge, it's unstable. You don't know what's going on. You're swinging, you're swaying, the wind and the cold, and there's doubt. But you take another step, and the weight of your body on that bridge, you sink a little bit, and you're like, oh God, I'm going down, I'm going down. But no, as you take the next step and the next step, so you want to be able to focus and see that that's there. But you have to walk across this perilous bridge that scares the crap out of you to get there. It's a journey, and the only way to do it is to travel it. So walking that rope bridge, you can do it, taking those steps, the fear, and finding maybe even that purpose on the other side. As you're walking through it, you have that chance to think and go, okay, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with my story? What am I going to do with what has happened to me? You can either sit on it and just survive it, or you can make something bigger out of it. You don't have to be a grief coach. You don't have to become a podcast host. But even if you do something simple, like I said, smiling at somebody, having a purpose, and changing somebody's day. Walk across that bridge, no matter how perilous it may be. There is hope on the other side. And that brings me around to your first question, Jaxon, how am I doing today? I'm doing well today. Not to say there aren't moments, there aren't days, but that is natural with grief. And one of the things to think about is that as human beings, the species, we're not meant to be happy 100% of the time. We are meant to feel those emotions. And how we deal with them is the question. We are meant to deal with those emotions. So today, I'm good. I'm good.
Amazing. I'm so glad you brought it all the way back. Yeah, I think it's as simple as this. Like, what you are afraid of is very frightening, right? The pain you feel is very real, and it's a lot. But however, hope, healing, overcoming your obstacles are just as real and just as possible. And it's one incremental step at a time, day by day, where your best looks very different every day. Some days you're deep in sadness and grief, but that doesn't mean you're still not moving through it. That means you're just being able to feel and acknowledge your loved one. And some days you feel great, and some days there's a mixture of emotions, and you're feeling good and bad at the same time, or you're feeling overwhelmed and excited at the same time, potentially at a family function where you're so happy to be with your family and friends, but you're also missing the one that you love who could be there, right? There's just so many intermingling of emotions, and just know that you're doing an amazing job if you're just trying. You're trying to do these things. You're aiming in the right direction. You're adding some more meaning into your life. You're being responsible for your decisions and your choices. And you're showing yourself that love and that grace and that kindness that you would show anyone else in your life who's going through the exact same thing. And so I think that's a beautiful place to stop. Do you have any final thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, funny stories, anecdotes to share?
No, I'm not the comedian, but thank you. Now, I would just say is that to reach out, and one of the things that I offer is if you really want to talk to me, please do. You can visit my website, thegriefspecialist.com, and that's with 2 E's. And there's a place that you can schedule a consultation and see if grief coaching is for you. I think I've shared that I'm holistic, and you have a good feeling of how I work. but until we connect, because grief is so personal,
Mhm.
and it's important to have somebody walk alongside with you. And we don't have that traditional system anymore. Life has just changed, and I'm here because I've been through it. And I would love to have that conversation and get a copy of my book. You can check out the first 365 days and stay tuned for my next one.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I encourage you to visit the website, sign up for the Thursday Thoughts, and then go to, you're on Twitter and Instagram as well, and Facebook as well, or the website is the best place to reach you at?
So I do have, I'm not as active on Twitter and Instagram. I am on there as the grief specialist, but so my Facebook is thegriefspecialist.com. Or if you'd like to join our community uplifting Facebook group, it's Grief to Hope, Mothers Who Survived the Loss of a Child by Suicide. That you can join that, where you can see some extra tips on that and just get some positive inspiration to move through that. So several choices. So I'd love to see you, love to chat with you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We'll link all that stuff in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you and experience all the beautiful things that you're sharing with the world. So I thank you for joining me today. You're amazing, beautiful, insightful, wise person. And I'm really glad that you're sharing everything you're sharing with the world so that, we can make it just a little bit more loving and caring, one day at a time. So thank you so much, and much, much love to you and your family and everyone that you touch.
Thank you so much, Jaxon. I appreciate it. And, I'm sorry that you're going through this, but had that not been the case, we wouldn't have met.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that a lot in things that have lined up in my life and how things have played out. And so I feel very lucky and blessed to be in this position doing what I'm doing and having these conversations and, doing this, which I never saw myself doing, but I'm very, 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 very fulfilled that I'm doing it. So that seems cool to me. Cheers. Thanks everyone for watching. See you guys next time. And again, this was episode number 88 of Jaxon Talks, everybody. On our way towards episode 90. That's amazing. And hope you guys have a great week.